got the live stream going? Thank you very much. I've been told that in order to speak on these microphones that we have borrowed for the evening, we have to press the button and keep your finger on it, or else it cuts you off. So that's going to be a bit of a nuisance, but anyway, I'm sure we'll manage. So thank you. I don't think I need to go through the emergency evacuation procedure because we don't actually have any members of the public here, so I think we all know what we do in the event of an emergency. Can we have any apologies for absence?
Apologies, Chair. There's no apologies for absence this evening.
Thanks, Ellen. Item 3, do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Duncan?
Just as North Yorkshire County Councillor, I don't know if it's taken as read or not, but yeah, on item 10.
Thank you.
Chairman, I was thinking that you would just take that as...
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations? Okay, thank you. Item 4, minutes of the meeting from the 23rd of September, which you have in your papers, members, from page 5. Anybody got any comments on the minutes of accuracy? If not, can we accept those by sort of general affirmation? Okay, there seems to be lots of nodding heads, so I'll accept those. Thank you. Moving swiftly on, item 5. The recommendations from the Flood Management Working Party held on the 5th of October, which are on pages 11 to 14. Now, there is a recommendation from that working party, which is the letter on page 33, which is the letter that the committee would like to send to George Eustace MP around planning in relation to water companies and the use of sustainable urban drainage systems, SUDS. I would like to recommend that is sent from the chair. I think it's a very worthwhile opinion coming from this council. We all are very aware that in planning terms, Yorkshire Water are not a statutory consultee at the moment. They are usually consulted, but obviously because they're not statutory, their comments aren't necessarily always taken into account. And for anybody who knows anything about flooding, sustainable drainage systems as part of the planning process would be an extremely good idea, particularly in an area like this where we do have long-standing problems with flooding. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that. I would certainly move it from the chair. Does anybody second it? Seconded from Councillor Potter. Does anybody have any comments to make? Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's just a quick query. Are we asking the government to consider the two bullet points that are in this letter? Are we asking them to implement these two things?
We're asking them to consider them. Obviously, there are changes happening in planning terms nationally at the moment. And yes, we're asking them to consider looking at implementing them. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Probably not, I'm afraid, Councillor Thackeray. If you want to send me a question afterwards or whatever, but probably not, because you've come to speak on a specific matter. And probably if you get started on the subject of Yorkshire Water, we could be here for quite some time. So. Okay, go ahead then, but yeah, quickly.
No, I'm not quite sure why you would want to change the status from a consultee to a formal consultee. The reason I say that is because if you ask Yorkshire Water's opinion and give them the option of not investing money in the business that they're in and the statutory duty that they have to provide sewerage and drainage for facilities, they will take the easy option and say, we don't think this is a good idea. So I think you're opening yourself up to getting the door shut on you by Yorkshire Water more often than not. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Councillor Thackeray. Welcome to the members that have just joined us. I presume you got stuck in the traffic. So, thank you. So, does anybody else have any comments on that letter?
Just one quick thing, which is I don't know enough about these two areas to know whether we should be writing to the government or not in relation to them. I don't want to stand in the way of it if it's come from the working party, so I'll probably just be abstaining on sending this letter, but I'd be interested to know a bit more around it, perhaps outside this meeting, just because they're two topics that I'm not got full knowledge of, and whether they is a good idea or a bad idea or not. But if it has been considered, I don't want to stand in the way of that, so I won't vote against it, but we'll abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Yeah, I mean, it has been considered by the working party on a couple of occasions, really. It was originally raised by Councillor Potter, who, as we all know, has a vast knowledge of flood-related issues. But yes, it has been discussed quite comprehensively, so I would like to recommend to members that we do send the letter. So if nobody else has got any comments, I've proposed it and Councillor Potter has seconded it. Could we take a vote on that, please? Those in favour? Okay. Those against? Abstentions?
Chair, that's 5 votes for and 5 abstentions.
Does that go to? So that letter will be sent. Thank you. Moving on, the minutes of the Local Plan Working Party on the 14th of October. There are no recommendations from there. The minutes are before you, so they're for information really at this stage. And item 7, recommendations from the Grants Working Party on the 28th of October. They're in front of you as well, on page, 21? Yeah. I'd like to, there's 2 sections to this. There are the grants, the community grants, and then there's also the 106 grants. I would like to recommend approval from the chair. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Does anybody have any questions? No, that looks like everybody's quite happy with those then. Can we take that by general affirmation if everybody's happy? Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, item 8, urgent business. I have no urgent business this evening. So moving on to Part A items, matters to be dealt with under delegated powers or determined by the committee. I've been asked if I could slightly reorganise the agenda at this point to bring up item 10, and then that will be followed by item 9. So if we can take item 10 first, the Malton and Norton infrastructure and connectivity update, and the proposed funding allocations that we're being asked to look at. I think, Howard, you're going to take us through this report.
That's right. Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, give an introduction to this report. I know we're stretched for time. The report provides an update on some of the key elements of the Malton and Norton infrastructure and connectivity work stream, which has been progressed in partnership with North Yorkshire County Council, and seek some approvals regarding spend of money previously allocated, particularly in relation to proposals for internal junctions and signal improvements, and developing proposals for a second rail platform, bridge and access path through to Norton, and also updates on A64 Junctions project development work. The recommendations are for approval of funding of £166,000 to upgrade the Butcher Corner traffic signals, and also seeking delegated approval for the Programme Director for Place and Resources in consultation with the Chair of Policy and Resources Committee and Section 151 officer to authorise the allocation of expenditure of the remainder of the existing funding allocation, and that's of £350,000 capital and £100,000 of revenue. Again, briefly, a few updates since the report was prepared. We had been intending to progress some feasibility and master planning work relating to the bus and rail station forecourt areas. And this had been included in a bid that the County Council had bid for Community Renewal Fund. We found out last week that the bids to Community Renewal Fund, only one of the 28 bids that the County Council had put forward had been successful. So that's for delivering a carbon negative energy system for North Yorkshire. So the bids that we had put forward for the forecourt area has not been successful. So we need to look at a different way of doing that. And linked to an item in this report about the Levelling Up Fund, we're looking to combine that piece of work with the work to do with the second platform and station improvements. That's still discussions that are ongoing with the County Council, so I can't give any real details of exactly what that'll entail. Also set out in the report is the proposal for the Levelling Up Fund bid was for a single bid that would cover 3 stations, Seamer, Malton and Thirsk. From discussions with officers at the County Council, that may be slightly different, that approach. It's not been finally decided, but that's something to keep an eye on. We may have individual bids for the Scarborough improvements, for the Rydale improvements and the Hambleton improvements. That does increase the potential amount of funding that can be bid for, but the downside is bids could potentially be in competition with each other. So that's further discussions that are ongoing. And I'll conclude my introduction there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. That's very helpful. So you've got the recommendations in front of you, members. Does anybody have any questions for Howard at this stage, having looked at the report? Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Howard, I was just wondering if we are to approve tonight the £166,000 allocation, which is the first part of the recommendations. What is the outstanding amount that's remaining, both in capital and revenue, that's been allocated already, that could be within the remit of the Director for Place and Resources to spend on the other projects?
Yeah, in terms of the capital, it would be just under £200,000, so 184, if my maths stands up. The revenue would not be affected, so there'd still be £100,000 left of that.
Okay, so there's on the current split at the moment, 184, and then a further £100,000 in revenue.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at this amount of 166,000. What's this whistling I'm getting? Yeah, how much... that's towards upgrading signals at Butcher Corner, specifically, I presume. How much are these... have you got any idea how much these signals are actually costing?
Sorry, Councillor Potter, I'm not clear which signals you're referring to.
It says on here, approved funding of 166,000 towards upgrading signals at Butcher Corner, which is the traffic lights, I presume. So how much are these signals actually costing? Right,
sorry, I misunderstood the question. The request is for the District Council to fund that work. So it's a contribution of 100% towards those signal improvements, and that would be done, the proposal is that would be done in advance of the proposed trial of a one-way system, including baseline air quality gathering data that the County Council would fund.
Yeah, it's just the fact that I'm very uneasy with the fact that we have no responsibility for highways and all the infrastructure, and yet we're putting in quite a significant amount of money, considering the comparing of our budget to North Yorkshire's budget. I mean, I've seen the bits later on about well, this is unlikely to happen unless we contribute towards it, but does that not smack a little bit of arm twisting, or perhaps there could be worse, worse descriptions of it?
I think how I would respond to that is, yes, it is the County Council's responsibility, it's a highways responsibility. Having said that, there's a limited budget that the County Council has got to invest in transport improvements in Malton Town Centre. And so if we can make a contribution towards some improvements, that enables the County Council's budget to go further on other improvements and basically allows a greater range of improvements to be delivered. I think I've set out later in the report that the county have already invested and have committed a significant amount of funding, considerably more than we as a district council have. And I think that's been largely as a result of the district council's sort of leadership of this partnership work to identify works that can be undertaken. And I think it's I think it's a reasonable request for them to make. Obviously, it's a member's decision to make about whether you wish to approve that.
Yeah, just another small concern, because it says reason for recommendations, and in there it says to reduce congestion and improve air quality, and yet you turn to page, was it, hang on a minute, I did reference it, I've lost it now, hang on. Oh, 6.7 on page 56, where it says traffic modelling of this option predicts an adverse impact upon the Malton AQMA. Is the, specifically the traffic lights, is that part of adversely impacting the AQMA, or is the traffic light part hope to improve matters?
Yeah, I can confirm the proposals to upgrade the traffic lights wouldn't have an adverse effect on air quality. According to the modelling that we've had done, that would have a positive impact, and it's been estimated. You can never tell exactly what's going to happen in the real world, but it's been estimated that upgrading traffic signals to mover software control or system could have a benefit of about 13% in reducing congestion. By doing that, that should have a positive impact on air quality. It's the one-way trial that has been modelled potentially to have an adverse effect. Sorry, it's not the one-way trial. It's the introduction of a one-way system that could have a potential adverse effect, and that's why the County Council are proposing to have a temporary trial of the one-way system to assess the impact in the real world of the introduction of that before making any permanent decisions on permanent changes.
Yeah, I have to say that the mover system in Pickering definitely had an improvement. That's it. Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Do we have Councillor Delaney?
Thank you, Chair. Evening, Howard. So 2.1A, I'm fully supportive of that recommendation for the 166,000. Can you explain the reason why the remaining 184 capital and 100,000 revenue will be, or is being proposed to be delegated to the Programme Director, Section 151, and the Chair of P&R? Is there any reason why that can't come back to P&R for specific approval on each item of expenditure? Thank you.
From my point of view, the suggestion of having it done that way, it's purely a matter of trying to expedite decisions. And I know that a lot of members are very keen to get improvements delivered as soon as possible, and it's taken a long time to get to where we are. And so as and when we get proposals to us, either from the County Council or anything else that comes forward, there is clearly a timescale and a lag involved in taking things through the committee process, and that, you know, potentially a couple of months can be added on to the timescales. There's no reason why it couldn't go to P&R, come through P&R, but the reason it's been proposed is to try and expedite decisions as proposals come forward.
Yes.
Thank you, Howard. No, I'm never one to want to hold up the implementation of schemes. However, I just think it is quite a large amount of money to not pass through this committee and have the appropriate input and scrutiny from members of this committee. Thank you, Howard.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to add to that before I come to you, Councillor Duncan. It's very much about this. We all know that this council now has a limited lifetime, and this project has been going on for, I can't even remember how many years. I've sat around a table talking about what's going to happen with junctions and traffic lights and one-way systems, and lots of proposals were being put forward. I was very disappointed by the items, the few items that came out of everything that's been put forward from the consultants. But I think it is really important that we do what we possibly can, because we all know how congested Malton and Norton are particularly. And I think we know as a council it would be good to deliver some of these improvements while we still can. And just to add to what Howard said about the 166,000, I do understand what you're saying, that it's coming from us, but the figures that have already been spent by the county are much larger, and they have also committed more money to some of the bigger projects like Musley Bank and looking at the work that might need to be done for that. So it seems a reasonable amount of money for us to be spending to me. Councillor Duncan, I think you wanted to come back.
Yeah, just one quick thing, which was to say that we did expedite this process when we discussed this. It must have been about 12 months ago now, whereby we allocated that funding, the capital and the revenue, so that only it could be a committee level decision rather than having to go to committee and then to council. And that did seem to me and to all members, I think, at that time to be a proportionate way of dealing with the balance between speedy decision making and also ensuring democratic member input. We are talking about £284,000 of taxpayer money, a significant amount of money. It's a topic which members of different political groups really care about and have got perhaps different ways of, different solutions and different proposals in terms of how to deal with this. And I do feel that the 284 is a large amount of money, and I don't know why we'd adopt a different approach now from what we did when we first agreed to expedite this by putting it into the remit of the committee. So I am a bit concerned about that, and I also do think that if you look at the time lag between when we made that decision to allocate the funding and the decision which we're taking tonight, I don't think that time lag and delay has been with us and our committee system. I think the time lag and the delay has been with the proposals coming forward from the County Council, and I say that as a County Council has been involved with the process along with Councillor Blair as well. So I'll maybe say more about that in debate, but I do think we need to think very carefully about giving anybody the decision-making ability for £284,000 of taxpayer money. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I have to say I completely agree with you about that the time lag hasn't been with this council, it has been with the County Council, but nevertheless time has moved on again and we do have a limited lifespan left of this council, so I think we should be doing everything we possibly can. Councillor Burr?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was actually quite shocked when I saw this. 2.1b, that we would actually do that, and I would actually like to move an amendment. It's disappointing to think that as a county councillor it has been not moved with as much speed as I would like, and I don't want anything to be held up, etc., etc. But I do think probably just over a year ago we did decide that this money should come back to committee. So I have got an amendment on that, Chairman. But what I was going to ask, my question to Howard, was actually what is the delay that you're worried about? If it does come back to committee, what is the delay? How long are we talking about?
I think it's approximately 2 months. I think from the point of view of getting a proposal that is there and ready to go, to drafting up a report, getting that report considered through SMB, getting that finalised, getting that on the agenda for Policy and Resources Committee. Clearly that depends on the timescales as well and what meetings are programmed in for P&R meetings. Between now and February, my understanding is there isn't another meeting, so depending on when proposals come forward, that could be longer or it could be shorter. In terms of, sorry, I'm not sure what I was going to add there, sorry.
Does that answer your question? Do you have a supplementary? No. Okay. Do all the other members have any questions for Howard? No. Okay. I'm getting the feeling in the room that we possibly need to take this as two separate parts, as A and B separately. I would like to move from the chair the approval of part A of the recommendations. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Delaney? Thank you. Item B, I would also like to move approval of that because I think it is a worthwhile way of working. I do appreciate it's quite a large sum of money, but in order to expedite the projects as they come along, it doesn't necessarily mean that all that money is going to be spent because I am slightly worried at the pace that this project is moving forward anyway. So it may not happen that all that money is spent anyway. But I think it just gives us more flexibility to move forward on projects if we do agree to that. So I would like to move that from the chair. I'm not sure I'm going to have a seconder for that, but I will ask the question. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Burr. Okay, so I believe we need to take your amendment first, or would you like to go through the debate?
Chair, through you, if I could just suggest that we deal with the first motion first, which was part A, so we debate that, any amendments on that, and then move to the vote, and we deal with then part B separately. It'll just hopefully avoid us getting tied up in procedural matters.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. That seems like sensible advice to me. So that's been moved and seconded, so we'll open part A up to debate now. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to tie us in procedural stuff, but I just did want to ask Simon if it would perhaps be more logical if the whole thing was moved and seconded, and then if someone didn't agree with the part B element, that there will be an amendment to delete that or to amend that as appropriate, rather than doing two different decisions. And I don't know where we stand with that, but that to me would seem to be more logical, and certainly that's the option and the route that I would prefer, but it was just to ask you your thoughts as monitoring officer.
Either way of dealing with it is constitutionally acceptable. We can either take it as two separate motions, or we can move it as one motion and then amend wording to either delete or change what's therein. Part B, at the moment, it's been moved and seconded as two separate motions, so that's what's on the table. But if members want to deal with it separately, you could withdraw those motions and move it as a composite motion.
I think I'd prefer to proceed as outlined, Simon. Thank you. If that's constitutionally acceptable, I think that's the route we should go down.
Sorry, just one other quick thing for Simon, which was, again, a sort of constitutional question, was Council delegated to this committee the ability to make decisions relating to the amounts of funding which we're talking about. Council didn't delegate to this committee, as far as I'm aware, to delegate to officers to spend that in lieu of a committee-level decision. So I did just want to ask you, Simon, perhaps with input, I don't know if we've got a finance officer available, to check where we stand in terms of financial procedures when it was Council that delegated the approval for committee to spend, not for committee then to delegate to officers to spend. I hope I'm making sense on that. Thank you, Simon.
Through you, Chair, my advice on that would be that this Part B proposal would need to go back to full Council if that's the case, that Council originally gave a delegation to P&R. P&R isn't able to change that delegation without referring back to full Council, because Council's effectively set a limit that this authority sits with P&R at the moment.
suddenly it sounded a lot more complicated than it looks written down as a recommendation. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. And I think at this point I'd like to ask Councillor Thackeray to speak, because you've come specifically to speak on this item, I understand. So, yeah.
Yes, just going back to what Howard said, and if I've got the right number here, Howard, please confirm that the change at the lights would reduce the congestion by 13%. Is that what you said the figures suggest?
Through you, Chair, we have moved
we've
into
moved into
debate.
debate,
Howard
yeah,
was just
so-
pointing out.
Yeah.
And normally we wouldn't have officers answering questions.
All right,
at this
okay,
point.
well, that's fine.
I think
I'll ask you
I
then.
think in the report that is what it says.
That's
Councillor
fine, that's fine. But also the report, which I refer to here as the WSP, North Yorkshire County Council. Mike has Councillor Potter very kindly pointed out what it says on the report, 6.7. Traffic modelling of this option predicts an adverse impact on the Malton air quality management area. The WSP executive summary it's a very large document, very comprehensive. The summary says the proposed scheme is predicted to adversely impact local air quality within the Malton air quality management area due to an increase in vehicle flows, queuing and lower average speeds on Castlegate. Now, the crunch, in my opinion, and the sort of Damocles for everybody in this room is that the adverse impact on air quality is to increase the level of air pollution by approximately 20%, which will reverse the gains that have occurred in air quality on Castlegate in the past 10 years and lift the level of carcinogenic nitrogen dioxide over and above the UK and European legal limit. So if this council thinks it's money well spent, well, very good. But I think this council exposes itself to legal challenge, personal injury claims, and this will have an automatic and direct impact on agenda item 9. Because what this council will be doing if it approves this scheme in its current format is exposing an increasing number of people to dangerous levels of air pollution. There's very little else I can say to anybody in that, other than so long as everybody here is happy to have their name in lights with photographs and hold and take full responsibility for damaging the health of the young children at the playgroup at the end of Castlegate, and the people that live there, and the people that walk to Morrison's, and shop at Morrison's, absolutely fine, crack on. I'm very pleased tonight that I'm not in the hangman's chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. Do we have other members who want to debate this matter? Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, we are now taking it in two chunks, aren't we? So just sticking with the first part on the £166,000 that's been proposed in terms of our contribution, I think it's important just to point out that obviously I've been part of the working party. I think there's 2 or 3 other people here that have also been part of the working party. This work has been split into 2 chunks. The first chunk is the action which can be taken more immediately around the Butcher Corner area, which I think everybody is part of that on the whole, thought that that was a positive and constructive step. The second part of the work around that corridor was at the level crossing junction itself. And as part of that, the one-way system along Norton Road, there was concerns from members expressed around air quality, and there was modelling, as Councillor Thackeray referred to, suggesting there could be potentially an adverse impact based on the modelling. However, that was for the second part of the proposal, which is going to be done in a phased way after a trial to fully understand the impact that that would have in terms of air quality. But the first part, which is the part we're discussing this evening, around the mover system at Butcher Corner, I don't think there was any concerns expressed as part of the working party in relation to air quality. So I think a lot of what Councillor Thackeray has said there is perhaps misrepresenting or misunderstanding what has been stated in the report. Maybe it's not clear, I don't know. But certainly for the part we're discussing this evening around Butcher Corner, there was no concerns around air quality in relation to that. Members across that working party were supportive, including the representatives of both the town councils as well. I personally see this as being a really positive thing and something which I actually think is a good use of Rydal District Council's resources. I think this is something which our residents want to see happen. I think it will benefit both people who live in Moulton and Norton, but people who travel in and around the towns as well. So I certainly support this wholeheartedly in terms of that £166,000 allocation. I see this as being a really good step forward for us. I am frustrated, as perhaps Councillor Keogh's also mentioned, around the time that this has taken, and certainly there's still a long way for us to go, but we are seeing some positive steps forward. I fully support this. I obviously do have concerns about the second part of this, which obviously I can speak to when we get to that point, but I would just like all members to be understanding that a lot of the warnings that have just been given there by Councillor Thackeray, they don't relate to this element of the scheme, and I would hate for, I think it's such a shame at this point, after it's taken such a long period of time, for members to think that the decision we're taking this evening is going to potentially have a damaging effect on health when that has not been thrown up by the modelling and has not been referenced in terms of that element of the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Burr?
Thank you, Chairman. So it's quite rightly been pointed out that we've had an awful lot of meetings and probably the most problematic area is to get opinions agreed on everything, including the air quality. And the air quality is probably the thing that has been the sticking point. I think that probably in Councillor Thackeray's defence, these have been split into two, and he will probably completely and utterly repeat what he has said when we move into item B. So when we were talking about the traffic lights, I think it was myself that went to county about 4 years ago, and we had a meeting in St Peter's Church Hall, and that was probably one of the quick wins that could be done. And probably 4 years, 5 years on, those quick wins haven't exactly been speedy. However, this would actually help that terrible lag when only probably one car can turn right up into Old Moulton Gate. However, having said that, I just want to make it clear to all members, obviously as councillors we get lots of emails from residents and we get stopped in the street. But this is something that really has got people concerned about air pollution. And it is something that is really concerning everybody. So I think that we need to be mindful that at obviously 2.1b, we are going to be discussing this. But because we have split this into two, I think like obviously Councillor Potter, I think it's an extraordinary amount of money, 166,000. However, you know, it will get probably 1 or 2 cars through much quicker and stop a little bit of the pollution. But I do think that Councillor Thackeray was quite right to actually raise those points for us.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to comment on this as well at this point. And on one of those rare occasions where I actually agree with Councillor Duncan, I think the benefits of these traffic lights, particularly, and the filter system, were not when the programme was built up to look at what was feasible and what was possible. They were not the item that that was seen to be going to increase the air pollution in that area. There were concerns about the one-way system, I think they would have been less. It would have been less of a concern if they'd actually listened to some of the proposals that included actually putting in a much wider one-way system, so that it wouldn't have just been a short section of Norton Road in a one-way system. It would have gone all the way around across County Bridge and down Castlegate, because that would have created far better flow. But that was dismissed by the consultants, unfortunately. But yeah, it is a substantial amount of money. It seems an awful lot for some intelligent traffic lights, but I do think on this occasion it will be money well spent. Do we have any other comments from members on Part A? No? Okay, in that case it's been moved and seconded. I think we'll put it to the vote just for Part A of the recommendation. Those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Part B. I think we'll take your amendment, Councillor Burr.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, as has been said, I personally think that this shouldn't be delegated, and I think that it should actually come back to the P&R committee. I think that that's what was my understanding, and that is something that I do want to happen. And I do want members' voices to probably be heard, and we need to work this out together rather than this happen. So that actually is my reason for this amendment. I want it to come back and that we all understand exactly what is happening, because I've got some serious issues regarding air quality. So my amendment is in 2.1b, is to remove grant delegated, and then to start with approval to be made by the P&R committee, remove to the programme director for place and resources in consultation with the S15 officer and the chair of Policy and Resources Committee, and then just add everything else. So basically it's just saying we will decide, we will debate this, we will discuss it, and obviously we're not delegating it. So would you like that, Simon?
Through you, Chair, my advice on that amendment would be we don't need to debate it, because you'd just vote against the motion, and we'd stick with the status quo, which is that Policy and Resources Committee deals with these matters, so we don't need to take it as an amendment.
Okay, that's fine if that's the way of dealing with it, which seems much simpler, I have to say. Councillor Potter, did you want to?
Yeah, could I just confirm that if we do that, it remains a Part A? So it would just be decided by P&R and nothing to do with full council?
Yes, that would remain as a Part A. It would only be if we wanted to revisit full council's current delegation that we need to send it back to full council.
Councillor Thackeray, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, well, I want to come back on what's been said about what I said, to be honest.
Well, can you be relatively brief, Councillor Thackeray, because you've spoken once already.
Councillor Potter referred to paragraph 6.7, and likewise I refer to paragraph 6.7. 6.7 refers to the preferred option, which I believe is what I was referring to, which includes introducing traffic signals at the Castlegate, Church Street, Welham Road, Norton Road, junction at the level crossing, incorporating improved pedestrian crossing facilities, making the eastern end of Norton Road one-way westbound, and improvements to traffic signals at Butcher Corner, including introduction of mover system, blah-de-blah, improved pedestrian crossing facilities. So I don't think I was wrong at all. I think this is the entire project, as described, that has been somehow split into two in the opening section. But there is a very important bit of information in this document which I am quite flabbergasted hasn't found its way into agenda item 9. And I will read it to you. Recent developments, see background papers, further details, are considered likely to lead to the introduction of stricter national limits of air quality at some point in the future. That's one of those classic UK legal terms, a little bit like the air quality law itself, that says that all people with or areas with air quality action plans should reduce the level of nitrogen dioxide to within the legally binding limit in the shortest possible time. Thereafter, it is illegal to allow it to increase again. So, what the officers have kindly pointed out is that the World Health Organization latest recommendations suggest that the guideline limit for nitrogen dioxide will reduce from 40 micrograms per cubic metre to 10. That is a 75% reduction at some point in time. I would suggest that this will be very soon, and that our decisions should be made with that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. I think the issue is this evening is that we're not looking at all the other parts of these well, allegedly quick wins. They're not very quick wins. We're looking at the actual traffic lights at Butcher Corner alone in Part A. So I think that's probably why some of the other matters haven't been raised, because they are not worked up for proposals yet, apart from the one-way system, which is going to happen as a trial. So, Councillor Duncan, did you want to?
Yeah, it's just returning back to the issue at hand, which is whether we agree to delegate to an officer the ability to spend £284,000 taxpayer money without coming back to this committee to have any democratic input. Just returning to that point, I think it's important to point out that while we allocated funding generally across capital and revenue towards measures to help improve ease congestion and deal with traffic problems in Malton and Norton, that is clearly a very general aspiration. There's many different ways in which you can deal with that, many different projects in which you can invest in. And it does say in this report, 6.27, it actually lists there a number of different things, and they range from Malton to a Motherby cycle route as one proposal. They range to a build out on Horse Market Road. They relate to a hopper service electric bus. They relate to a second platform at Malton Station. They also relate to the one-way system on Norton Road, which has been the source of some debate this evening. That is a wide-ranging set of proposals, and clearly what one member might support, another member might not. What one political group might support, another political group might not. There's a lot of political discretion that would need to be exercised by an officer before giving approval to those schemes. And while there will be consultation with yourself, Chairman, and hopefully you would then have consultation with others, I think the guarantee that we need on this item is that this comes to committee for a formal decision to be taken on whatever proposal comes forward. And I have to say I am disappointed to see, having worked with officers directly on this way back a year ago when we decided to allocate this funding to try and expedite things, to see that there is actually the request there as a recommendation to members to actually give that delegation. I don't think that's proportionate or appropriate, and I also don't think it's in the best interests of our officers who would have to make potentially some controversial decisions. I think they need to have the protection of democratic members meeting, debating and discussing as is right and appropriate. That's our job and our duty, and I think that we shouldn't support the delegation that's been laid out for such a vast amount of money. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think Simon has suggested a sensible solution to this because obviously reading the room, this is not a popular item. So we do need to put it to a vote. So those in favour of...
Could I ask for a recorded vote, please, Madam Chair? I don't know if we need 3 people or not, or if that can just be accepted.
Thank you. Yes, that's fine. Yeah. Simon, do you want to just briefly explain exactly what you said so that people are very aware of what they're voting for?
So the motion that has been moved and seconded is Part B of the recommendations in the report, and that proposes delegating authority to make decisions to officers in consultation with the Chair of Policy and Resources Committee. For members who want to maintain the status quo, which is that those decisions sit with Policy and Resources Committee, you would vote against that motion. And that's why we didn't take a separate amendment, because just voting against has the same effect the amendment would have.
Is everybody clear with that? Okay. Okay, those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you, members.
Chair, just to confirm, that was 9 votes against and 1 abstention.
Thank you. So we now move on to item 9, the Rydell Local Plan Review, Distribution of Development and the Options Consultation document. And Rachel is going to take this report. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. The report before members tonight is to seek member agreement on the scope and content of the Distribution of Development consultation, as per the recommendation of the report. The Distribution of Development consultation represents a key stage in the review of the Rydell Plan. It has been building up momentum since the summer and has been subject to 2 meetings with the local plan working party, shaped further by responses from members of that party to develop the document before you tonight. Although it is not a prescribed consultation within our local development scheme, it is nevertheless a critical consultation because the distribution of development and the resulting settlement hierarchy is the backbone of the local plan. The document firstly asks what are the factors that should be taken into account when developing the approach on the distribution of new development, and seeks views on which options should be chosen and why. Its scope is reflective of the partial nature of the review of the Rydell Plan and sets out what are considered to be the most appropriate 2 broad distribution options for Rydell District Council to consider. These are option 1, to consider the approach of the Rydell Plan as it currently operates, which focuses on the towns and in the principal town in particular, to concentrate new housing at also the market towns and the service villages, with meeting the local needs elsewhere. Option 2 proposes a less concentrated, more dispersed approach to distributing growth, with development focused at the market towns and specific villages, including those existing service villages and selected additional villages. Although it is a consultation which is relevant to all our consultees, it is directed more towards local communities and stakeholders. The consultation therefore also asks a series of questions to gain information and perspectives about places, to build up a picture of capacity, both in relation to opportunities for development and also where there may be constraints, to ultimately identify a group of villages alongside the market towns where allocations of land could, in principle, be made. Further questions are around policy choices concerning the amount of housing to be delivered. Other specific housing policies are also identified as are general policy areas that the review will cover, notably around how the plan review will respond to climate change. The findings of the consultation will rest alongside specific consultation with statutory consultees, technical evidence, and ongoing consultation on specific sites, forming a body of evidence from which the chosen spatial approach will be identified and be made the subject of a key decisions paper next spring. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So we have the recommendation on page 25. Before we move into debate, does anybody have any questions for Rachel? Paul, I do know you're here to speak, but if I can take some questions from members first. Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering if you would just be able to just point out, obviously members have got potentially different views as to how development and what our approach should be and where development should take place. But clearly we are not doing a wholesale review completely of our local plan because we've got a sound local plan as things stand at the moment in planning terms. Clearly there's a sort of, it's not a complete departure from our current local plan approach. And I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit about why we perhaps haven't looked at potentially more radical alternatives in the context of local government reorganisation and the time constraints that we've got, and why we've gone with this approach as opposed to something that could be very, very different.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, well, the Rydell plan was adopted back in 2013, and as part of that work, we explored distribution strategies that were quite broad spectrum. We looked at, in effect, of focusing development at only the market towns with very much local needs outside of the market towns. We also then consulted on a very much strongly dispersed option, which would have effectively allocated development across the piece to, in effect, all settlements. What came out of that work was actually a more moderate approach was required, where effectively, yes, we would focus a significant amount of development at the towns, and certainly at Moulton and Norton. And there were specific reasons why that approach was taken. That was around looking to capitalise on infrastructure investment that could be achieved at the towns. And that actually has come to pass, and apart from obviously Norton Lodge, which hasn't yet the applications in, but so that was one of the key aspects of that. But we also did look to identify key villages that we would seek to deliver some development at, and those villages have, for the most part, actually seen either development happen or they have planning applications or an allocation, and it was only Staxton and Willoughby where we've not actually had any site capable of coming forward. So, as in terms of going through that process, the planning inspector who examined the plan was very clear in summing up the sort of the choices, the informed choices and the decisions that members made. And he concluded that it was a sound approach that, as a district council, that was a strongly rural authority, that it should seek to look to develop and focus a significant proportion of its housing in its market towns, but also a proportion to other settlements, smaller settlements, villages that had key facilities that would then be able to deliver housing at a more sort of local level and meet local needs. And he considered that that was a sound approach to take. So on that basis, in terms of this consultation, it was felt that it is not appropriate as a partial review to divert and go sort of off-piste effect, and then to go basically and have an approach where we would consult on a very focused distribution strategy where we were focusing a lot of development at the market towns, nor have a strategy where effectively, again, we would then be distributing it across all the settlements. The purpose of the consultation is to test the existing strategy that we have, and that's option one. And then in option two, it is to consider how that strategy can be moved forward to reflect the fact that we are going into LGR and that we are looking to develop potentially a more responsive approach to emerging demands and needs that are coming out. One of those is around air quality, another one is around climate change. Also looking at the fact that in terms of commuting patterns, and I was in the JAC meeting this morning in terms of with the A1B meeting, and they were talking there about how development could occur in some of the rural settlements to enhance the protection of services and facilities. So that's the general rationale as to why we are proposing these two options before you tonight.
And if we were to go down a much more radical approach with a complete departure from where we were now, is that something, what time frame would we be looking at for that realistically? What would be possible for us to achieve, given if it was such a radical departure?
If it was a really radical departure, it's very unlikely that we would not be in a position to take a document through the various stages of the plan-making process and get to submission before, in effect, LGR actually happens and the new authority is in place. Yes.
Thank you, Rachel. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Potter?
A really simple one. The recommendation says to delegate authority to the Programme Director for Place and Resources. Who exactly is that?
That's Philip Spur.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, before we go into debate, members, then Councillor Andrews has come to speak on this matter. So, Paul, would you like to say what you have to say?
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Can I say that the Working Party debated this and had certain concerns. As a result of those concerns, it was agreed that we would have further discussions with officers separately. I did that, and I think we came up with, it was a very constructive discussion, and I think we came up with agreement on most things. However, there was one sticking point. And the sticking point seems to emerge as a result of misunderstanding between officers and members. Now, my understanding was that the purpose of the review was to review the housing distribution policies, which would be a wide-ranging exercise just of the distribution policies. This is what Lindsay and I asked for 2.5 years ago. Instead, the officer's understanding is that this is merely an updating exercise which does not revisit other broad strategic approaches which were discounted in the development of the Rydale Plan. On this basis, Chair, the officers have come up with two options. Firstly, the current approach, which they still think is sustainable, although they admit it is challenging. And secondly, an approach which merely tweaks option 1 and allows for less allocation of new housing land to the principal town, namely Moulton and Norton, but does not allow the public to think outside of this straitjacket. The officers do not seem to accept that the existing distribution policy has failed. They take the view that because the inspector agreed in 2012, on the basis of documents prepared and provided by officers and/or consultants instructed by officers, that the fully dispersed approach was not acceptable. That decision is in the past, and the council's views were not challenged by expert evidence before the inspector. The inspector's decision was in 2012 and is now, in my view, out of date, and it is right, therefore, to review the performance of the existing plan in terms of distribution in the widest possible basis. I've argued very strongly that option 1 should not be considered because it is unsustainable for two fully evidenced reasons, as well as the evidence of members' own eyes and noses and complaints by the public. The two fully evidenced reasons are, first of all, once the Beverley Road development is completed, the council will have exceeded the number of new houses in Moulton and Norton, which were recommended in a report dated October 2010. That number was 2,165. And secondly, because of the infringement of World Health Organization guidelines, which I believe Councillor Factory will want to speak about, in regard to air quality within the air quality management area which we have in Moulton. However, officers would not accept my arguments, so I tried to reach a compromise, which would have left option 1 in place, but reworded option 2 to read a less concentrated, more dispersed approach to distributing growth over the towns and villages of Rydale. In my view, this is more likely to produce a positive and constructive response than the wording used by officers, which is likely to set villages against towns and towns against each other, and is going to cause a lot of angst and confrontation publicly and within this chamber as well. Officers will not accept this. Their argument is that this brings back into play the general dispersed option, which was dismissed in 2012. This is not correct, as the option as I have redrawn it relates only to towns and villages. It does not suggest a criteria-based policy which would allow development all over the countryside. It is not the fully dispersed option. It invites the public to give their views on a whole range of possibilities and does not rule out anything. It does not even rule out the restricted approach of option 2 as it is already drawn. The officers say that if the result of the consultation was a call to review the existing development limits, they would never be able to do the necessary work before May 2023. My answer to this is a consultation. And although the council has to take this into account, has to take the outcome into account, the council does not have to do what the public want. The decision is the council's. Secondly, if the work is too much for the officers, then fair enough, engage consultants. We have the resources, we can do it. I would stress that this is a consultation exercise. I just cannot understand why the public can't be given the opportunity to consider a full range of views. Why do they have to be forced into a straitjacket? It is a consultation paper, Chair. We are a democratic body, and we are supposed to represent the people. Why should they not have the widest possible choice? Why should we not ask them what they want? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Thackeray, did you want to speak on this item as well?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Could it be relatively brief, please?
Yes. It can be incredibly brief if you want. I'll just point everybody, if everybody wants to scroll or turn the page to page 35 of this agenda item, which is the old chestnut of air quality yet again. I think we've worked out, or we've got an indication from spending a huge sum of money with consultants that if the junction changes and everything gets done, we're going to have an increase in air pollution in Malton and Norton. I think that's a given from the evidence that we've been presented. So bearing that in mind, increased development in Malton and Norton will increase the number of vehicles, will increase the number of vehicle movements, and will increase the level of air pollution. So concentrate housing in Norton, Malton, and advocate that people walk through Castlegate, cycle through Castlegate, is to advocate that they inhale, breathe in dangerous levels of air pollution, potentially. Now, the officer's report points out that whilst a new evidence base is in preparation to inform the choices, we are aware that in order to deliver further large-scale growth, major investment in infrastructure would be needed, particularly if improvements to congestion and air quality are to be achieved in the future. And really, I think members are going to have to assess where they put the houses on the basis of the damage that they do to the health of the people that live here. And I hope, and I did suggest at one of the local plan working group meetings, that when this consultation is made public, that the public are made fully aware of the dangers of nitrogen dioxide, which will be the result of increased development in Malton and Norton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thackeray. We'll open it up to debate then from members of the committee. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make? Councillor Burr? Oh, so apologies. Yes, it has to be moved and seconded, and I forgot to do that. Would somebody like to move the recommendation? If not, I will do it.
I'd like to move it, and I'd like to make a couple of amendments, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Do we have a seconder? I'll second it then. Thank you. Councillor Bird, do you want to share your amendment now? Then?
Yeah, so obviously we're all concerned about the huge developments that have happened in Malton and Norton, and obviously in our towns. As has been said, I don't think that option one is sustainable. I don't think as a council we could support it. This is a consultation document, and that's all we're doing. So these amendments are quite are quite simple, really. I'll tell you what the amendments are and then I'll speak to it. So the first amendment would be to option 2. So wherever it's mentioned in the document, obviously it would be changed. At the moment, it says that a less concentrated, more dispersed approach to distributing growth within development focus at the market towns and specific villages, including existing service villages and selected additional villages. So I would like to delete with development focus at the market towns and specific villages, existing service villages and selected additional villages, because I do think that that is too tight. And I think I'd like to substitute that with the simple words of across the towns and villages in Rydale. Okay, so that's the first one. And as I say, I think that the public really do need an opportunity to be able to have a say in where they want their developments to be. I will give you the second amendment and then I will speak to it. So the second amendment is, it's quite simple, really. And it's on page 14 and it's page 44 of the agenda. And it says the following words. All I want is for us to add is 3 words under the present policy so that people can understand that it's under the present policy. Now, I've given a copy of this to Simon and I'm sure that he can actually reiterate it to you exactly. But I would like to speak to it, and the reason that I want to speak to it is because my inbox, once again, I'm sure you councillors have the same. People are worried about development. Everyone knows that we need more houses. That's a given. We know that, and we've got to be really proactive on this. However, the infrastructure is just not in place. Option 1 is not sustainable, and people need to be able to change their way that they actually live. The officers have done a really good job, but I just feel that it needs tweaking. And I think that it's something that, as Councillor Andrews said, nearly 3 years ago we asked you for this, and obviously you weren't supporting. I then got the local MP to come and we sat for over an hour in this actual, these council offices to discuss it, and he actually agreed with us that, you know, we need to do something about this. We need to spread the housing. We haven't got the infrastructure and we need it to be allocated across Rydale. The pandemic has changed people's lives. Things have changed since 2013. They really, really have changed, and people want to live in the countryside. People want to have that ability. This plan, this consultation, it just is too restrictive. So that is the reason why I hope, and they are very small words, but they do make a big difference. I hope that it can just be cross-party and it can be supported. So I think, Simon, maybe if you could help us on that just to get an understanding, because obviously I've thought a lot about this and I understand it, but your councillors are looking and probably going, oh, I don't understand that, I don't know what that is. So is that okay, Chairman, with that Simon can just go through that?
Yes, that's fine, because I did lose the wording,
Yes.
so thank you.
So hopefully to provide clarification for members, the motion that's moved is set out at paragraph 2.1 of the report on page 25, and that's asking members to agree appended consultation material for the public consultation. And what Councillor Burr is proposing is that that appended consultation material is amended in two places. So the first one is the second option that's being consulted on. So that's the wording of that's on page 27, and the amendment is proposing to delete the wording with development focused at the market towns and specific villages, including existing service villages and selected additional villages. So the second part of that wording is taken out, and it's replaced with across the towns and villages in Rydale. And then the second change that Councillor Burr is proposing is on page 44 of the agenda, in the section headed development limits, the second paragraph there, which starts when land is identified or allocated, and Councillor Burr is proposing to add 3 words at the start of that paragraph, so it reads under present policy when land is identified or allocated. So hopefully that clarifies for members what the amendment is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Are members clear now on the amendments that Councillor Burr is putting forward? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, Chairman, I was just wondering, because obviously the option 1, the option 2, everything flows from that sheet of paper, basically, in terms of the explanation and in terms of the questions, and the fact that this is hinged basically on a slightly attuning the current distribution strategy, not having that radical approach has been explained by the officers because of the time constraints which we have. And clearly, if we're changing the option 2, that's changing also the substance, I would imagine, of option 2, which is going to fundamentally change the questions which we're asking and the explanation which we're giving to the public. And also, if the public give us views which they're going to support on this, I can't see how we've got the time to actually implement and deliver that, given the pressures of local government reorganisation. So it isn't, I aren't speaking to this at the moment, I'm just simply asking the question, and I would like an officer view, which is this radically changing what's being put forward? Because if so, I would struggle to support this, and I don't think we as committee members can sit here tonight and weigh up all of the advantages, disadvantages of what's been put forward in full knowledge of the information. This has gone through a working party which Councillor Andrews is chairing, and it's come here tonight, and yet Councillor Andrews as chairman has spoke against it, and the vice chairman of this committee is putting an amendment forward. It doesn't seem to me to be the best and constructive way of dealing with it when our officers are there and available, hopefully to take our views. I support what's been laid out already, and I've just got some quite serious concerns about what the implications could be of the amendment that's been put forward. I would like to, if possible, hear from an officer as to their view on the implications of this.
Yes, I was actually going to suggest the same thing myself, because obviously at this stage, when a lot of work has gone into this consultation document, the recommendation does say minor changes. Possibly the one on the development limits is a minor change, but certainly changing the options themselves is not a minor change in my view either. So, Rachel, would you be prepared to answer that?
Yes, happily. Yes, in relation to the proposed change to option 2, officers do feel that if we don't specify that there is to be a selection of villages, then as it's being proposed, it would basically say across the towns and villages of Rydale. That would be, in its strictest interpretation, a dispersal approach. What the option 2 seeks to do is to identify that development will be focused at the market towns and the service villages and additional villages. Now, those additional villages are at the gift of members down the line. Once we have undertaken the consultation, we've got the views from local communities, those settlements that would like to see development in their villages to support their facilities and services that they have. So that's why we are seeking to have option 2 carefully phrased so that it allows that ability to add in additional sites but not present as an approach of dispersal with regards to the settlement strategy.
Thank you, Rachel. I think that's really helpful. Members, we're debating the amendment at the moment. Would anybody else like to speak on the amendment, please?
Chair, apologies through you. Can I just ask who the seconder is on this amendment, please?
Oh, sorry. So it's been proposed by Councillor Barr. I don't know who. Did anybody second it?
Yeah, I should have actually said I don't know if I've got a seconder.
Yeah. Does Councillor Barr have a seconder? Apparently not, unfortunately. Okay, Councillor Potter is going to second it. Okay, let's open up the debate then on the amendment, the two amendments, but we're taking them as one.
Thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, and obviously just speaking to this, I'm really concerned, obviously, having heard from the officers there, about the implications of what this could mean for the consultation which we are undertaking. I think it's vitally important that we're honest with the public about what this council can actually achieve in the lifespan of what we've got left as a council. And I think if we are going to make progress, we're best making constructive, reasonable, proportionate progress based on what we're actually realistically going to be able to achieve. The alternative to that is that we don't make progress, don't get to a point where we can have a sound plan moving forward that is fit to the needs of our area before we run out of time. And the risk then is that we don't have land allocated and identified for development, and therefore we're opening ourselves up potentially to the risk of development which is outside of our control. I think that is a real and severe risk. So perhaps what Councillor Burr and Councillor Andrews fear could actually potentially become a reality. Now, we all may have very different views about how we want to approach development in this district, but we have to look about what's viable and what can be achieved. And I think what's been put forward by the officers is viable and is achievable based on the responses which we get back from the public. I think it's also worth pointing out this is a consultation, and what the public say to us might influence what we do next. If there isn't support for either of these ways forward, perhaps we need to look more radically. But I think we need to do what is proportionate and what we possibly can do in the time frame. Councillor Burr had mentioned that she's greatly concerned about development and mentions that others are too, but actually we know where our development is going to be and where our development has been, because we decided as local councillors, I think unanimously with one exception, which is Councillor Andrews, I have to give it to him, who didn't support the policy when it was put forward in terms of the local plan at full council. We all supported the development distribution, we all supported the allocation of the sites as a council cross-party. So now to act surprised about the scale of development and the problems with development, yes, they may be there, but we have to deliver housing, we have to do that, it's our duty as mandated by government. So I think we've all got to be really honest about actually we've got some tough decisions to make. It may not be an ideal world, but what can we do with the time that we've got left? And I think going down this route with this amendment is actually going to cause more problems than it solves. I would want to stick very closely with what's been devised by our officers in full knowledge of all of the information and their professional knowledge too. And I reiterate the point again finally, which is I'm quite surprised that we've got a cross-party working group which has supported this process from the start. We've now reached a critical point in terms of consultation with the public, and the chairman of that working party is arguing against what's being put forward, and the vice chairman of this committee is putting forward something radically different. The Conservative group has been quite consistent on this. We believe that there perhaps is a new way of doing things and a different way of doing things, but we also understand the reality of the situation in terms of what we can actually do right now. And I think it would be a mistake for us to go forward with this amendment as has been submitted. I think we need to move forward with the consultation as has been planned. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any Councillor Delaney?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I believe Councillor Andrews, Paul Andrews, makes some very valid points, and I know, as Councillor Duncan said, he's been very consistent on the issue. My concern is, though I may agree with him on certain aspects of this, if we deviate substantially and effectively start again, we won't have sufficient time to deliver a comprehensive plan, and it could leave us exposed and potentially open to planning by appeal. Unfortunately, what will happen is that Councillor Andrews may then get the very thing that he doesn't want, something like a high Malton, and then unfortunately for him, that might end up being his legacy of this council. So my concerns, as Councillor Duncan said, is that would be the worst out of the two options, and therefore I can't support this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not 100% comfortable with this. I seconded it so that we could actually debate it. First thing I'd like to say is that I think with this whole local plan review, we're probably about to run into some huge problems, particularly from the inquest in London over the young girl who died that was actually blamed completely on air quality. That is a big thing. It really is coming down the line. With the World Health Organization recommendations that have slashed the levels regarding air quality, that's another big issue. The problem there is that it is a recommendation and not a law. So, as I've said previously, I think we're going to have to be agile on that, because one would like to think that we have a government that's going to react to that, to both those important issues, but I won't be holding my breath on how long it takes them to get round to it. And if that happens while we are trying to develop this policy and get it to the inspector, it's going to cause us problems. I don't particularly agree with a lot of what Councillor Andrews says about the redistribution, because I want to see sustainable development and not trying to build in villages that are completely unsuitable for that purpose. However, coming back to the amendment saying across the towns and villages in Rydale, I can't help but think this is a consultation. This is asking what the public view is on this. And I am uncomfortable with pointing the public down certain lines to perhaps an opinion that we've already decided on, because we haven't. We will be deciding on the local plan review after we've had various stages of consultation. So if that's the case, it does encompass everything. It is a slight alteration from the original option 1, which I too believe is no longer sound. But I come back to the fact that this is a consultation. We are not making a decision here, but I am rather uncomfortable in the fact that we are already trying to point the public in certain directions, but we still have to ensure that whatever the public come up with, it is sound, it's sustainable, and we can actually do it. I just want to add that I have a little amendment as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Potter. I mean, my comments on this is that are that this is a review of the plan. It's not a rewriting of the plan. And we have the expertise within the building to put together these options. I think we're actually doing the public a bit of a disservice here if we're saying to them, you know, this is the detail that you need to look at, because I think the public are quite, the explanation in the consultation document, it says the pros and cons of both options, and I think it explains it quite clearly. And if members of the public aren't happy with what is in there, they are, you know, they will be free to add their own comments. So I think we're in a real danger of delaying this process. We need to get on with this public consultation. We're going out to it, it's part of the process, we have to do it, and it's only right that we should do it. But I think the public are capable of making their own comments. and they will do, because a lot of people do feel strongly about the different options, and I'm sure they will do that. But I think we're messing around with a few words, and yeah, I think we just need to crack on with it. Thank you. Does anybody else want to debate the amendment, please? Could you respond quite quickly, Councillor Andrews, please?
Yeah. At this point in time, he doesn't have the right to reply. He's not a member of the committee.
If you're brief, Councillor Andrews.
I'm accused of not chairing the committee right because I'm not agreeing with what the officers said. But I'm sorry, but these two options came up out of the blue at a meeting in August. No previous consultation with members. I seem to remember it was just produced orally. And then a month or two later, we got the consultation document. The consultation document, well, I didn't see it until Tuesday, although I think it actually arrived in my house about on the Friday before the meeting. No previous discussion, and I'm the chairman of the planning committee. And if we are in a situation where officers land something on our desk at the very last minute and then expect us to rubber stamp it, if we allow that to happen, we are putting ourselves in a very, very dangerous position.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I think you have probably had the opportunity at the working party to discuss the consultation document, and I understand that you've also met with officers to discuss it separately as well. So I think we should be very careful about the comments that we make about our officers, because they have worked incredibly hard to produce this document for us. Does anybody else have anything to say on the amendment? If not, we'll take it to the vote. Oh, sorry, you've got a right to reply, Councillor Burr. Apologies.
No, that's absolutely fine, Chairman. So, yeah, just to reiterate on a couple of points that, remember, councillors, all I'm asking for is a change of wording on the consultation. Whatever we get back, we are the decision makers. We can decide what we do, how we move forward, etc., etc., etc. All I'm asking for is the public's opinions in a slightly different way. That's all it is. And I'm really pleased that Councillor Duncan said, that we've got to be honest with the public. But all this honesty is due to reorganisation. Maybe we wouldn't have been in this situation. It's all about reorganisation and doing the best that we can do and handing over to North York County Council. I think that we don't want to continue to overload our towns. We've got to be honest with the public that obviously if we don't provide any new infrastructure, we will still put houses in the towns. We did decide a while ago, and there's no dispute we've decided a while ago, but like I say, things have changed, life has changed, COVID has changed everybody of what they want to do, how they want to, what they want to happen with their lives and how they want to live. People want to live differently. That's something that we've got to listen to. I do agree that a councillor said, we need to do a new way of doing things. Well, maybe I would say, isn't this the time to have a new way of doing things? Why can't we? We are elected members. Why can't we have a new way of doing things? Air quality is really important to everybody, especially in Norton and Malton. I don't want to say that I'm thinking about Malton and Norton all the time, but it really is a problem, and we just need to give opportunities to see if people want everything put in the towns or if they would like to see some dispersion. That's all I'm saying. And finally, I'd just like to say it's a consultation. We are the decision makers. We do need to listen to the public, and the best thing that we can do is give them this choice. And then when we get all the responses back, we can make those policy changes as to what we want to do. I mean, I'm not asking you to completely change the world. I'm just asking for a few amendments. But it's entirely up to you. If you want to just stick with the status quo, then, you know, that's democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Burr. We'll put this amendment to the vote then. Those in favour?
Could I request a recorded vote again, please, Madam Chairman?
Chair, would it assist for me to do a
To
roll
do a roll
call?
call. Yeah, thank you.
Can you just repeat it again? Sorry, Simon, because I didn't get it all.
So in the motion at paragraph 2.1 of the report, it asks members to agree the appended consultation material, and Councillor Burr is effectively proposing 2 amendments to the consultation material. So one is to option 2, which is on page 27 of the agenda, and it's to delete the end of that paragraph from with development focused at the market towns through to the end, and add in instead across the towns and villages in Rydale. And then the second change is on page 44 of the agenda in a section headed development limits, the second paragraph down there, which begins when land is identified. Councillor Burr is proposing to add under present policy at the start of that paragraph. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, those in favour, please show.
I thought we were doing a roll
Oh, sorry, we are doing a roll call. Sorry, Alan.
Councillor Joy Andrews. Councillor Arnold. Councillor Burr. Councillor Delaney.
Against.
Councillor Dockra.
Against.
Councillor Duncan.
Against.
Councillor Frank.
For.
Councillor Graham.
Against.
Councillor Keele. And Councillor Potter.
For.
Chair, that's 4 votes for and 6 against.
Thank you. So moving back to the original recommendation, Councillor Potter, I think you said you had another amendment.
Yes, I'm not too sure whether it actually needs an amendment or not, because question 18 on page 45 was added at my request, and I think there's a slight misunderstanding between what I've requested and what's gone into the question, because the implication from the question, when it says there are 6 separate issues there, and it says please rank from 1 to 6, and my intention was for each one of those to be ranked as in very important to not important, perhaps 0 to 5, something like that, because the way the question has been put, I can almost guarantee that energy efficiency would come at the top and biodiversity would come right at the bottom. But unfortunately, that wouldn't comply with the basic 3 pillars of planning: economic, social and environmental, because and the fact that the 3 should carry equal weight. So that would immediately suggest that we had to put certain issues right at the bottom, so it wouldn't work. So if I can just be assured that what I intended in the first place was a sort of important to not important. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah.
Are you happy with that?
Yes, yes, we are happy with that.
was our misunderstanding.
It was our misunderstanding.
Yeah, I probably didn't make it quite as clear as I should have done. Thank you.
Okay, that sorts that one out quite quickly then. That's great, thank you. Okay, so we need to go back to the original recommendation. Councillor Duncan, do you have another point on the original recommendation?
It's not an amendment, don't worry. It was just a few comments I wanted to make. First of all, as mentioned before, I don't think the way you can approach such a complex topic like this is when you've reached this stage. I think our officers are open to comments and suggestions. Just heard there from Councillor Potter, who clearly had submitted something for consideration and that had been taken on board. And I think that does seem to me to be the best way of approaching these things, rather than popping up with amendments at this stage or making actually quite grand attacks on the document that's been produced. We've seen both of those this evening, and I don't think that is really the way forward. It's quite right, officers do not run this council, members do, and there are 3 groups on this council that control the chairmanships and vice-chairmanships of all of the council's committees, yet several of those people still do not seem satisfied with the outcomes that are coming forward, and I find that quite surprising because they've got all of the mechanisms and levers at their disposal to ensure that the recommendations and the work that's taking place in the background long before a report comes before a committee is at a stage where they can be happy and comfortable with it. So I'm quite surprised to see some of the disagreements at this late stage on something that has been ongoing for such a long period of time. This is not something new. One comment that had also been heard was around the time frame and handing over to NYCC. I don't see local government reorganisation as handing over to North Yorkshire County Council, and that is certainly not the approach that I will be taking. This is going to be a brand new authority of which there will be democratically elected councillors who can make decisions on behalf of the residents who elect them. That may or may not be people in this room, but we're not handing over to the successor county council. That is a new body and it should have a new way of working, so I wanted to make that point. And the third point I wanted to make also was around this debate in terms of environment and air quality. And people seem to be suggesting that if you don't build new houses or have development in the towns, and you put them in the villages, you're going to solve the air quality and environmental issues in towns. The fact of the matter is that if you have people living in villages, people who live in villages are much more likely to need to travel by car to get to the services which they need, be that a doctor's surgery, be that a weekly shop at a big supermarket, be that travelling into schools. They've got to use the car because realistically, in a district like Rydale, they can't walk and they can't cycle long distances. Council Potter is an exception, I do admit, but the vast majority of the population don't do that and aren't able to. People who are in the towns, you'd like to think, would have the option, if we had nice, safe, easy-to-use roads and junctions, to use sustainable means of transport. So actually, I think we're looking at this in the wrong way. If you have all development in the villages and none in the towns, you're still not going to solve the issues in the towns if you don't then have the leverage to gain the money you need to put into infrastructure. The point I'm trying to make here is there's difficult decisions to make. There's no silver bullet. There's no way we can deal with this issue that is not controversial. Difficult decisions to make. But I think by sticking with the general principles of what we've got and attuning that to the needs we have now based on from where we were, let's say 5 years ago when we first made decisions around this local plan, I think that's the way to go, and I think we can actually achieve something before we go as an authority, and that's not handing over, it's to a new authority, but we can still have an input, I think. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Yeah, just in response to that, I think probably Councillor Burr was not saying handing over to North Yorkshire County Council. I think she did actually probably mean to a new authority. But I think the key point is that we do need to get the Rydale plan. When we've met as group leaders, that this was the biggest priority that the group leaders had, and I think in the council it is one of the biggest priorities that all members have to deliver it. And so my fear by having this argument over and over again about a consultation which is going to come back to us, which we will then make decisions on, we are delaying that process, and we can't keep delaying this process. So thank you. Could we put the main recommendation on page 25 to the vote, please? And we're doing it. Are we doing this by roll call, or are we just going to do it by a show of hands?
I would like a recorded vote on this one as well, please, Chairman.
Thank you.
Councillor Joy Andrews.
4.
Councillor Arnold. 4. Councillor Burr.
Abstain.
Councillor Delaney.
4.
Councillor Dockra.
4.
Councillor Duncan.
4.
Councillor Frank. 4. Councillor Graham.
4.
Councillor Keel.
4.
And Councillor Potter.
4.
Chair, that's 9 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Anne. Okay. Sorry, to item 11, Part B matters referred to Council. Item 11, the localisation of the council tax support for scheme for 2022 and 2023. And I believe Marcus is unable to attend tonight, so Margaret is going to present this report to you. Thank you for your patience, Margaret. I assume you're there.
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. The following report seeks committee approval for the final local council tax support scheme for 22-23. The report seeks to approve the recommendations that the scheme for 22-23 remains unchanged from the scheme administered in 21-22. The authorised the Section 151 officer in consultation with the Chair of Policy and Resources Committee to undertake necessary consultation work and design a scheme for 23-24. The report provides a detailed analysis for committee and elected members of the current scheme, which was undertaken to look at the impact of the scheme and to consider the amendments to the scheme to increase the number of children from 2 to 3 and 4 plus included in the household. Following the detailed analysis, a public consultation was undertaken and published via the Rydale District Council website. A significant media programme was also undertaken to maximise participation. In total, 86 responses were received from residents across the district and county, with good representation from residents. The response rates received were a significant increase in the previous consultation in the year before, 2019, when we received 35 responses. Of the 75, of the responses, 77% in favour of no change to the current scheme. It is recommended that because of the consultation response and the responses of 77% for no change, that the recommendations to the council are agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Do any members have any questions for Margaret? Councillor Duncan?
Just a quick one, Margaret. Obviously, of the responses which were received, I know this is a consultation of residents, but also partner organisations as well. It was open for them to give responses. I was just wondering if we did have any comments that were received from those organisations, and if so, how many of the 86 were from those partners, which obviously work very closely with people who might need council tax support. Thank you.
I can't see in the report. I did have a wee look before, Councillor Duncan, but unfortunately Marcus isn't here tonight, but I can go and double check. But I think the majority of the respondents were actually from people just from the area, but I can double check for you whether there was any responses from any of partner organisations.
Yeah, thank you. It's not too critical. It was just, I suppose generally the question I'm asking is the partner organisations which work closely with people who might need support from us, do they seem quite happy and satisfied with the scheme? Is there any particular issues that they've flagged in terms of usability, simplicity, access to the scheme which we have at Rydale?
I haven't heard anything come back to us, Councillor Duncan, but again, I'll ask Marcus if he's had anything back. Really, the scheme really starts to simplify things, because before, when it was being tested, it was quite complicated. So you'll even see from some of the responses, people agree that it's actually a simpler scheme. So, but I can double check that with Marcus and come back to you.
Thanks, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Margaret? No? Okay. Well, I will propose the recommendation from the Chair. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Burr. Can we open that up to debate, members? If anybody has any comments they would like to make or discussions? No.
Sorry, just a quick
okay,
one, which was to say that there had previously been quite a lot of discussion and debate around this, when actually I do feel that the scheme we've got now, we've had for the past couple of years, has been a significant improvement on the scheme that we had before. Obviously, there was the issue raised around changes for people who had 3 children or 4 or more children, and actually I do think that that is something which really isn't needed. And also I just wanted to point out that if you look at our scheme and the discount and support that is available, you will see on there that the scheme we have is significantly more generous in terms of the maximum reduction than, for example, Scarborough Borough Council, which is a Labour controlled authority. York, Liberal Democrat and Green Controlled Authority. And I think the scheme which was laid out of 100%, obviously under Conservative control, and this was implemented, I think actually is generous, is the right thing to do, is simple and does work. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Do any other members have anything they want to contribute? Oh, sorry, Councillor Burr.
It's okay. I think it's just because I'm out of your eye. That's absolutely fine. I think that what we should do is we should always be confident to have a look and review and amend anything. And it should be no shame that we're actually looking at it and making sure that we're actually going to ensure that any family who has 3 children plus, it doesn't really matter whether you're Conservative, you're Labour, controlled council, any upstanding citizen or councillor would want to have a little look and just make sure that everything's right. And that's what this council did. They had a look to ensure that a family with 3+ children were going to be okay, and that's all it was. It was not anything political. So I don't really think that we should be starting to be political in this chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Burr. If there are no further comments, we'll take this straight to the vote. It's been proposed and seconded. Those in favour, please show.
Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members. Moving on to item 12, the review of the Ridership Council Air Quality Steering Group, looking at the options and opportunities for member involvement. Rob, are you presenting this report? You've been sitting here very patiently for quite a while, so thank you for your patience. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, all. I will start by giving just a brief introduction into the Air Quality Steering Group and the work that it does. The Air Quality Steering Group was set up following the declaration of the Air Quality Management Area for Malton due to the exceedances of the annual mean objective level for nitrogen dioxide. The group comprising of professional officers from Rydale and North Yorkshire County Council was tasked with developing and implementing an air quality action plan to identify and introduce measures to reduce the levels of nitrogen dioxide. This plan was adopted in 2012. Air quality monitoring is an ongoing process throughout the district, and we are required to report this monitoring annually to DEFRA via an annual status report, which allows all the data to be reviewed and analysed by the steering group and DEFRA, and this highlights where further action and investigation may be required. Since 2016, there has been no exceedances of the annual mean objective level for nitrogen dioxide. However, the declaration has not been revoked as the Air Quality Steering Group is concerned about the effects of proposed additional rail service between York and Scarborough, which will result in greater downtime for the level crossing barrier and will increase stationary traffic. And also the proposed changes to the traffic network through the air quality management area, and specifically next year's trial of a one-way system for Norton Road and upgrades to the traffic control system at Butcher Corner. Following consultation, North Yorkshire County Council have informed that as air quality is a district responsibility, they are agreeable to a member of Ryder District Council attending the steering group. As the majority of the group's work will be concentrated on Malton and Norton area, it would be most appropriate if the elected member put forward to be on the group was either a representative of Malton or Norton wards. The recommendation of the report is that the Policy and Resource Committee recommends to Council that a local district councillor be appointed to attend future meetings of the Air Quality Steering Group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. I think this one should be fairly straightforward, I'm hoping. Obviously, this proposal has come from full council with regard to the motion that was put forward, asking for local member involvement in the Air Quality Steering Group, which I think is an excellent idea. So I would like to propose this from the chair. Do I have a seconder? I'm assuming I will have.
I'd like to very much second.
Thank you, Councillor Burr. Do we have any questions for Rob before we vote? Councillor Potter?
Yes, can I just ask how that member would be decided, assuming that we vote for it?
I assume it would go forward to full council for a decision on that member in the usual way? No, thank you. Any other questions for Rob? Councillor Duncan? How
Rob,
predictable.
Sorry. Just one question, Rob, which was, I know the North Yorkshire County Council had mentioned that they were very keen for this to remain as an officer-only group, and I was just wondering if you haven't mentioned this already, just some of the reasons behind that in terms of how this body was set up and why they seem quite keen that this remains a technical body without member representation directly on it.
I'm not 100% sure that's a relevant question, to be honest, Councillor Duncan. I mean, obviously we've now moved that position and they are keen for member involvement. Do you have a
doesn't say that in the report, though, I don't think. It says that they would prefer for it to remain as a officer-only body.
Rob, do you want to respond to that? Please don't feel obliged to, because I think it's clear what the steer of this council will be on it, and I would hope that members would support that. But
yeah, I think obviously we consulted with North Yorkshire County Council, and that was their position. One of the assistant directors for transport and highways. That's how we were informed of that opinion, that he wanted to keep it as a officer group only, but because recognition that the district council has responsibilities for air quality, they were agreeable to a Rydale district council member being on the steering group.
Thank you.
In terms of the reasons why they were opposed to this, in terms of the nature of the work this body does, Rob, I was just wondering, do you know why they had that position, which is they'd prefer for members not to be on there?
No, I'm not aware of how that decision was reached. It was just conveyed in that way.
Thank you.
Councillor Burr?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it was just really following on really from what Councillor Duncan was saying. I did actually raise this with Rob, and I said that I just can't understand why members would not be wanted, and why officers would not feel that we would probably have some value, or we would probably bring something to the table. So I think we need to move on now. North York County Council didn't want that, Councillor Duncan, but now we are where we are, so at least we are going to have somebody on that committee. So I think that is, after a long wait, I think that is a good thing, and I only hope that we will meet quite frequently. So my question is, how frequently will we meet, Rob, please?
We have been meeting annually recently due to there being no exceedances in the levels, but we can meet as frequently as necessary. The proposed next meeting will be early in January to review the annual status report for last year, and obviously to look ahead to the trial period of the one-way system down Norton Road and the enhanced signalling. So we'll start in January, and we can set a meeting after that if required, sooner.
Thank you, and just a supplementary, Chairman. So, Rob, are we in control of setting the dates then? Would we be the drivers for this? Because obviously I do think, obviously it's been mentioned tonight about worries about air quality. Could we bring those meetings to, say, every quarter, just to keep a check and balance on this?
Yes, we are the drivers of the steering group, so we could, set them every quarter if that was the views of the group, yes.
I strongly suspect at the next meeting the proposal to that effect will be put, because annually doesn't seem enough, frankly, really, because yes, although we haven't had any exceedances, there are obviously huge concerns in the community at the moment about air quality. So thank you, Rob. Does anybody else have any questions? No, we're going into the debate then, I think. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't know if I missed something here, but obviously there will only be representation on this body if this committee recommends to Council and Council decides to accept our recommendation, that there will be that representation. There seems to have been in the questioning that's taken place, sort of, oh, North Yorkshire County Council have moved their position. They haven't. Their position is that they don't think it's appropriate, and I can understand why they don't think it's appropriate to have member representation on there. So Councillor Burr's asking about dates of meetings and regularity of meetings. It's almost like she's already got a diary out ready to get those dates in. We have to make a decision as to whether we think this is the right thing to do or not. And I don't think this is a case of officers saying they don't want member involvement. Clearly, officers work under our direction and also under the laws and the protocols which we have to follow and we have to align to. And I think they would always try, I would hope, to take into account member views about how strongly we feel on this and also the ways forward and the potential solutions to ensure that we don't have those exceedances around air quality. But there are a whole host of different bodies, officer groups, officers' meetings across the district, across the county, joint meetings, meetings with external partners that our officers do almost every single day of their working lives. And it isn't appropriate in nearly all circumstances for officers to be accompanied or have influence at those points, I think, from members. We have our committee meetings, we have working groups, we have member briefings where we can talk about these issues. We also have other means of communication where we can directly talk to our officers. And I have to say, I do think that we are potentially blurring the lines here by having member representation on something which is really a technical body which is looking at data and information and trying to consider professional recommendations to make to members if and when appropriate to have that input. So I'm quite concerned about having a councillor representative from Rydale on this body, particularly if the county council also isn't going to have a representative as well. And I think we just need to be very careful that while we feel passionately about an issue, that we're not having representation where it's not appropriate or it could actually prove to be a hindrance to our officers. They've got a very different role to what we have as members. So I'm not comfortable with this. Clearly, if the view is for it to happen, it will happen. But I'm personally got a lot of reservations because if we do it on this, what do we do it on next? And suddenly we become a full-time officer of this council when that is not our job or role to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
I think there's a general view that, as I said a few minutes ago, that air quality in Malton and Norton, I think as Rob's also said, that it's a very big issue, it's a growing issue. We've just been talking about the local plan, we've been talking about the need for better infrastructure. It's a huge issue in this community, and I think having a local representative on this committee to actually tell it as it is in some respects. I mean, I know of other officer-led meetings that happen at County Hall, and it often seems to me that there isn't that local input, that the meetings are then reported back to us as members, and sometimes they seem like they don't have the local knowledge. And I say, because it is a particular Malton and Norton issue, as Rob said, it would be good if it was somebody from Malton Norton, but it doesn't have to be on this committee. But no, I think in terms of collaboration, there should be a lot of opportunities for us to work with our officers, and on something as significant as air quality, I would like to see us involved in that. Obviously, not every meeting members should be at. There are issues that officers discuss themselves and we present to members. But I think on something as significant as air quality, as it being such a huge issue, we should have some representation. Councillor Graham?
So I don't quite understand this. There must be something I'm missing, because I thought that officers considered and made recommendations, and it was at that point that the members were involved. Whatever is recommended, they can then debate. You don't have to have anybody else on a committee or a body of people. That's not our job. And surely everything we want to say can be said when the recommendations come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Frank, did you want to speak? Oh, sorry. I thought that's what you said. No? Councillor Potter.
I said... Sorry, I said I was next, I think. That's all I said.
Yeah, I've just been transported back a few years to the Slowing the Flow scheme. And I was just thinking about academics and officers and, you know, sort of employees of the Environment Agency, all those sort of people. And they've got all the technical skills, they've got all the technical knowledge, but put them somewhere up a catchment and they haven't got a clue about the specifics of the area. And that's when there is a real importance for local knowledge and local feedback. And I just see this as exactly the same sort of thing and of equal importance.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Burr, sorry.
It's okay, I'm quite prepared to wait my turn. I just couldn't agree, and obviously there are different views of opinion in the room tonight. I do agree with Councillor Potter. I think that on certain issues, and certain issues that are really, really in tune with what the electorate are thinking about at the moment, we absolutely need as much member involvement as we can, and especially with local issues, and especially because we've got massive problems in Norton and Malton that we want to resolve. I'm going to take it as a compliment that Councillor Duncan thinks that, you know, I've got my diary open. As you know, I'm very, very willing, but unfortunately I'm sure that I won't be able to fit it in. However, you are a Norton member, so it's open to anybody, but I just think that on this particular instance, I think that the officers would view that local input, and I am only hoping that it would be an added benefit rather than us interfering with what officers do. And I think that we all, as elected members, just want to be involved. That's what it's about, I suppose.
Thank you, Councillor Burr. Do we have any other comments? No? Okay, and here's me saying at the start of this item, I thought this would just go straight through because I thought everybody would support this one. Anyway, it's been proposed and seconded, so shall we put it to the vote? Please, members, those in favour? Those against?
Chair, that's 6 votes for and 4 against.
Thank you, Ellen. That's obviously carried. And thank you, Rob, for your patience and waiting for quite a long time for that matter. Moving on to item 13, the Yorkshire Wolds Designation Project, which is on pages 93 to 98. And I think, Jill, you're going to take us through this one?
Yes, thank you, Madam
Thank
Chairman.
You.
In July of this year, Natural England confirmed that the Yorkshire Wolds had been selected as an area that it was going to consider designating as a new nationally protected landscape, an AONB, Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. That followed a government decision to increase the number of protected landscapes in the UK, and it also followed a proposal, a bid made by the East Riding of Yorkshire Council. So Natural England would be the designating authority. They've established a project team to start the work that's necessary. So that includes gathering all the evidence to help justify the designation, a lot of landscape assessments around identifying and defining the natural beauty of the area, the desirability to designate it as a protected landscape, and looking at the detailed boundary that could be required. The project team are also looking at what they need to do in terms of ongoing engagement and consultation with stakeholders, and clearly seeing the project through what is quite a long and complicated statutory process of designation. Local authorities are a key partner in consultee in the designation process, and we're represented certainly at an officer level on the management and technical teams, along with the East Riding of Yorkshire Council, the North Yorkshire County Council and Scarborough Borough Council. And Natural England are also intending to run specific events for local politicians. The aim is, and I haven't got a specific date, but they are aiming to run one this side of Christmas. It's anticipated that the process will take approximately 4 years. That is a new fast-track process. In the past, nationally protected landscapes have taken a lot longer to designate. That said, if Natural England do decide to designate, make an order to designate the landscape, it could take a little bit longer than 4 years if the Secretary of State decides to hold a public inquiry before the Secretary of State confirms the order. It would only be brought into effect if the Secretary of State confirms an order. So the report outlines the designation process and the main implications of the designation. In essence, for landowners, that amounts really to some restrictions on permitted development rights and on major development within a nationally protected landscape. For local authorities, once designated, the constituent local authorities are responsible for preparing a management plan for the area. We have that responsibility for the Howardian Hills, for example. And we'd also be subject to a statutory duty to have regard to the purposes of the designation when we carry out our duties and our work. Madam Chairman, the report recommends to Council that, subject to amendment, the Councillor Middleton's motion on this matter is supported. So the recommendations are as outlined in the report.
Thank you, Jill. That's great. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Jill? Councillor Delaney?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jill. Just not that I'm, not that I don't support this. I'd just like to know, has there been any public consultation or engagement with the people that this will affect in this area before I can look at making a decision? Thank you.
Today, I'm not aware of any consultation that East Riding have done. They may have done some consultation and engagement when they made the bid to government. Natural England haven't done anything as yet. They're establishing the programme for that. Yeah.
Councillor Docker? Oh, right, okay. Yeah, if it's a 4-year fast track, they've probably got quite a lot of time to do the consultation still. Thank you. Do we have any further questions? Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, just again, it's I'm not necessarily opposed to this. Just a simple question, I suppose, Jill, is given there hasn't been that consultation with residents who might be affected by the proposal, I was just wondering on what basis we've made a decision as Rydale that we think the recommendation to us is that we should support this. There may well be a multitude of good reasons, and as I say, I'm not opposed to it necessarily. It was just, do we know enough at this point, given where we are in the process?
I don't think it's necessarily relating to this specific project, but certainly work that we've done around, for example, the local plan, consultation on the local plan. We get a lot of feedback on the way in which people value landscapes across Rydale. And it's been raised in the past, the fact that the Yorkshire Wolds, which we ourselves designate as a locally important landscape, is something that perhaps should have a higher level of protection, a higher status. So I think it's coming from it indirectly, and our experience of consultation on in a wider sense, really.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, so the proposal is an amended motion, which is on page 97. Do we have somebody who would like to propose that amended motion that will go back to full council in due course?
I'd like to move that, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Burr. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dockra. Okay, having done that, do members wish to debate this motion further? No, doesn't look like it. In that case, we'll take it straight to the vote. Those in favour, please show.
Chair, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, members, and thank you, Jill, for your patience of sitting there behind me. I feel very rude with my back to you, but thank you very much. Moving on to item 14, this is another motion from Council that was referred to Policy and Resources on the local plan review. Is this another one you're doing, Jill?
It is, Madam Chairman, yes. Thank you. Yes, so this report considers a motion by Councillor Paul Andrews which seeks to appoint consultants to take the council through the local plan review. Chairman, the report covers in broad terms the implications of outsourcing the review to consultants. These include human resources implications for existing staff, procurement implications, I think particularly in terms of the context of the time period that we have in which to complete the review, and cost implications. We do have a budget agreed by Council to appoint consultants to prepare the necessary technical studies to support the review, but certainly not a budget to appoint consultants to lead or solely deliver the review. We have sought to get some indicative costs to test the appetite of consultants to in effectively taking on this work if it is outsourced. I have to say it's been very, very difficult. We've not found any real recent examples, comparable examples of local authorities that have sought to wholly outsource local plan work. We have approached a selection of consultancy firms just to give us an indication of whether there's an appetite and cost. And we've had responses. We've had responses back from a consultancy firm that operates on a sort of a regional basis across the North East, North Yorkshire and Cumbria. And we've also had a response back from a national multidisciplinary planning consultancy. The regional local company have said that it's not something that they would be interested in doing, and that's purely because they see they would have a conflict of interest. They have a lot of clients that progress, for example, sites and promote sites through the local plan process, so it's too much of a conflict of interest for them, although they do undertake work for local authorities in terms of the development management planning application side of things, not the local plan. The national multidisciplinary company did say that it could work with the authority, but it envisaged that would be on the basis that it did it in a sort of a co-leader role with the existing staff team. So it would assist with project management, and it would do it on the basis that it as a company undertook all of the technical work that was necessary. I think that to come to it cold and to be the company that did all of the work, if it was outsourced to one company, I think they think it's too ambitious in terms of the time available to pick something up and do it in the time available. And I think that reflects the comments that I've made in the report about procuring this work if it was to be outsourced in its totality to one company. I have to say the conversation I've had with the multidisciplinary company is food for thought. I think there would be advantages in working with a consultant that could provide some critical friend support role for officers and for members of the local plan working party. And there's potentially some time savings around the project management of technical work. But clearly that's a conversation I need to have with our procurement advisors at North Yorkshire County Council. But notwithstanding that, what this multidisciplinary company is suggesting is very different, I think, to what the motion is seeking. And that is that consultants are appointed to take the council through the review, and that they do that solely. Madam Chairman, there are no further updates, and the recommendation is as outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Do any members have any questions for Jill? Members of the committee, please. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just simply, Jill, obviously from listening to what you said there seemed to be the suggestion that even if we were to decide to go down this path, we may well struggle to actually find consultants who would be willing to do this for us at anything like a reasonable cost. Is that, from your initial assessment, what you found that this could be a bit of a struggle?
At a reasonable cost and with the time available.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, Councillor Burr?
Thank you very much for that. I think that one thing that we probably do need to take from this is how we could actually move forward and actually have critical friends, because I do actually believe that that is something that we could look at as an organisation, and I think that it takes that stress off our team, that they are overwhelmed with the work. And I think that obviously maybe it's not for this particular exercise, but I do think that the hybrid approach is something that we need to be exploring. Even now, we need to ask our officers to explore that, because if we can get the best results, then I think that is something we should do. So is this something, Jill, that you would like to actually, obviously depending if you've got the time, have a little look at and see if that's something that you could work with, or maybe recommend to council that we could work with this hybrid approach?
Well, one of the things that we really need to do, and we need to do quickly, is complete the commissioning of all the technical evidence that we need to do. And as I say, talking to this multidisciplinary company, I think, as I say, there is food for thought about how we go about that. I need to take advice from the procurement advisor that we talk to at North Yorkshire County Council, but it is something to explore. I have to say that the company that we spoke to are a company that, I don't know, some of you may be aware that at one point in time the government was exploring taking plan-making responsibilities off some local councils that weren't performing. And this company are on they undertook all the work to get on the framework agreement that could have done that work for government. So they are well placed to do it. They are saying to us that they don't think they can do it as a whole within the time available, and it is something different. But it's not, I suppose what they're proposing is not really any different to what we would be doing anyway, which is commissioning technical evidence from consultants to provide us with the advice that we need.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions from committee members? No? Okay. So you have the recommendation in front of you on page 99. Could I have a proposer for that? Sorry, Councillor Andrews, you did, but can we have it proposed and seconded first, and then I will come to you in the debate before the debate starts? Do we have somebody?
I'll propose it.
Okay, we have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Potter. Okay, having done that, we'll move into debate. But yes, Councillor Andrews, you did ask to speak on. Could you try and keep your comments relatively brief? Thank you.
Chair, I will just concentrate on answering the points made in the report. I mean, first of all, I'd say that the hybrid approach would sit reasonably with me. 3 points on resources. First of all, the council planning department before IEASY was 11. They then went down to 6, and the report suggests it's now up to 9, 3 more posts. However, even 11 staff took between 6 and 8 years to prepare the Rydale plan, which was adopted in 2013, and then another 6 years before the adoption of the sites document in 2019. So I would suggest that it would be helpful to have a firm of consultants to assist and to perhaps supervise what goes on. Second point on resources. The planners department say they have enough staff now, and they raise fears of redundancies, etc. What the report does not take into account is the potential for staff to leave and get other jobs. And there's bound to be an exodus as reorganisation gets closer. This will result in increased demoralisation, which I think is likely to affect the progress of the plan. The engagement of consultants would ensure continuity in a way that the existing situation does not. I believe, incidentally, that there are already lots of staff looking for jobs in other authorities or early retirement.
Councillor Andrews, I don't think that point's relevant to this discussion.
The point is relevant, Chair. Resources. Third point on resources. The more limited the resources, the less thorough the review will become. Jill has told me that more than once, the department doesn't have the resources to do a full review on, for example, village development limits. I simply say, Chair, we want to leave a decent legacy for our residents. This means we want a full, proper review, and I don't see how we can do this without employing extra help. Cost, Chair. We have loads of money, this council does. Whilst it would be useful to have an estimate, cost should be no object, in my opinion. If we want to leave our residents with a legacy which we can be proud of, then we should pay the cost. Then come to the question of logistics. I'm sorry, but I don't accept it should take so many months to appoint consultants. The officers have been engaging consultants for years and they've done this very efficiently. If members want officers to fast-track the engagement of consultants, they should be able to do this. There should be no difficulty in drawing up a specification, as the officers know what has to be done, and they made that very clear to us all the way along. Then there's a question of redundancies. And this actually links with the hybrid approach. Nobody is suggesting, Chair, that work on the plan should be paused until consultants take over. The officers will be expected to carry on with what they are doing pending the engagement of consultants and to continue to work with the consultants after the consultants take over. There should be no need for redundancies or staff reductions. What we're talking about is an extra managerial and technical resource. Time. Chair, officers.
Is this your last point, Councillor Andrews?
No, Chair, I've got two more.
Well, could you be
Chair.
Be quick, please.
Well, Chair, I do think I should be fair for me to respond in full, as it's such a long report I have to respond to. Officers, Chair, have other priorities and do not seem to have enough time to spend on reviewing the plan. Our first notice of motion was in May 2019. The officers advised against engaging consultants then, and a working party was set up instead. It met, I think, just 4 times before lockdown. It met in October 2020, but the next meeting did not take place until August 2021. We had another meeting in October 2021, and that's this year, and I forgot to set a date for the next meeting. I've asked officers to set a date, and I've told they can't do this week or that week because they've got other things to do, other more important things to do. And to date, they have not even circulated working party members asking what date would suit them. It could be after Christmas, probably will be at this rate. And finally, question of expertise. Our officers have massive expertise, and I'm not suggesting that they don't, and I'm not criticising their expertise. Please understand this. But our officers have in the past relied on advice from county or county's consultants on highways issues. This advice has turned out to be a disaster. A firm of consultants with their own highways and traffic experts would be an advantage, in my opinion. Further, consultants such as the national ones you're talking about will have a far wider knowledge of what is possible within the plan framework than our officers will be, because they will cover far further areas, and they will know more thoroughly what happens in other authorities and what is possible in other authorities. So to have a firm of consultants in would help us to benefit from their wider knowledge and deal with these things. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Members of the committee, would you like to make your comments? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's quite interesting that Councillor Andrews is saying that certain consultants come up with entirely the wrong answer, but others come up with exactly the right answer. What's the guarantee that we get the right one? Personally, I'm quite satisfied with the existing situation where our officers can call in specific technical consultants when and where they're required. That seems entirely appropriate to me. At this late stage, I can't see that calling in an overall consultant is feasible, particularly given the time constraints, and that seems to be confirmed by what Jill has said. And finally, I personally value the local expertise and knowledge of our current officers to actually do the job. I think that's an extremely important part of what they're doing. So I can certainly support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Arnold?
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this. I think our officers do a great job. I fully support the recommendation. I think most of the time, every time I listen to Councillor Andrews, everybody's wrong and he's right. And I think what he said tonight is exactly the same thing.
Thank you. Councillor Burr?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really pleased that this was actually brought forward, and I'm really pleased to listen tonight to what Jill has explained, and it just proves that actually, if anything, it's actually stimulated officers to actually feel that we can actually have critical friends and dip in and out when we need expertise, etc. So I think it has been positive, and sometimes, you know, you don't always get what you expect, but it really, really is good to review everything. And as I say, the officers, I don't think there was any criticism of the officers. They do a great job and they're very professional in the way that they do it. But it is very heartening, and I thank you, Jill, for that, for saying that you quite like the hybrid approach and you probably will look into that. So thank you.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's interesting from Councillor Andrews that he states, I'm not criticising our officers, yet he doesn't want our officers to do the job that we pay them to do and that they're professionally qualified to do. He wants consultants to do it instead. That, to me, does sound quite like criticism of our officers, or at least a lack of faith in them to do the job. I do have the faith in them to do it, and I think the alternative is that we engage consultants at great cost and potentially at great delay to a very time-sensitive and time-restricted review of our local plan. I think we have no option but to continue down the track which we've embarked upon, and I think that we can produce something. As long as our officers remain on that track and we're there to support them, I think we can do something to help maximise and optimise our local plan moving forward in the coming years. Councillor Andrews has expressed his views strongly and persistently over many years. I have to give him that. He has at least been consistent and persistent with asking for consultants to be engaged. The difference, though, now from the first time when he called for this is he is in the role of Chairman of Planning, and he's also chairing the Local Plan Working Party. He has been given, for whatever reason, support by that working party to chair it and to take it forward. I'm not quite sure he's the right person to do that, given that he seems to be in a fundamentally different place to almost everybody else on the council on this issue. The Conservative group didn't support him to be Chairman of Planning, others did, the majority of the council did. And I think it's interesting that Councillor Andrews really isn't asking why the people who supported him to be Chairman of Planning, who put faith in him to do that role, are now not listening to him on an issue relating to planning. He's clearly got strong views. I think they're wrong, I think they're incorrect. I've always said to him on this issue that I don't support him. The Conservative group's been consistent. But I think it's interesting. I think he needs to ask the question, why did people back him to do the role of Chairman of Planning, and also why did they back him to be Chairman of the Working Party, when it sounds as if across different political groups that they don't support the approach that he has been calling for many years, which is for the engagement of consultants. I think that's interesting. I think he needs to ask that question and try to find an answer. From my perspective, and from the Conservative group, we're sticking by what we've always said, which is we have a time-limited opportunity to review this plan. We need to crack on and do that, and we give our officers the full support, the consultation earlier on as part of that process, and moving forward from there. I think that really is the only way forward, and I think there is a very grave risk that if we don't go down this track, and if we do engage consultants, we actually risk derailing the whole review of the local plan. And that is, I think, the last thing that members across political groups want, and I think actually the last thing that Councillor Andrews wants as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments that members want to make? Oh, sorry, Councillor Burr, yes, you have spoken once, but you did want to come back, so... Yeah.
Thank you, yeah. I just sort of look at this as quite from a different angle, really. And obviously we have got LGR, and whether we like it or not, it's come in. And I just think the welfare of everybody who works in this organisation is absolutely paramount. We are putting tremendous pressure on the staff because we are saying that this is our top priority to move forward and get things done. But when people get disillusioned, when they don't know what's going to be happening, they look for other jobs, they hand in their notice, etc., etc., etc. And that probably could have been used. And I hope Jill, if she finds that she does need extra support, she could use that hybrid. And I think that we haven't got to forget that. So I am coming just at a slightly different angle to some other members. But this is democracy and we're not always going to agree.
Thank you, Councillor Bear. Just from my point of view, I also want to comment on this subject. As several members have said, we've said that the plan, I think I said it myself earlier as well, the plan is a huge priority for most members of this council, I think. And I think it would be very damaging to the plan going forward to engage consultants about at this stage. It would delay things. It would delay and delay and delay, apart from anything else, because the procurement process would take time. And yes, Councillor Andrews says people could carry on working, but if on the plan at the same time, but how demoralising to say, well, you just carry on with what you're doing, but we're going to get some others in to work on this. You know, we've built more capacity into the planning department. We have extremely skilled, talented planners in our planning department. We do not need to buy in this expertise. I just think we are wasting time even discussing this, and I know we are discussing it because it came through a motion to council. But I feel it is quite demoralising for staff to have this discussion. The well-being of our staff has to be a priority at the moment because we are rolling very rapidly towards local government reorganisation. And, you know, by even putting these proposals forward, I find it quite demoralising, to be honest. I think the other comment I'd like to make on the local plan working party, there does seem to be something of an issue there because the other working parties that I sit on seem to come around fairly regularly and they make decisions and those are put forward. But the local plan working party seems to have its meetings, but then the chair of the local plan working party then goes to have another conversation about it because it hasn't made the decision that perhaps he would like it to. And that in itself is delaying the officers from carrying out their role and bringing forward this plan. They've set out in the report an excellent timetable. They've got a plan as to how they're going to deliver the plan for us, and I think we should be sticking with the officers we have and their skill and expertise. Thank you.
Can I say two very brief things? The first one is, I think the issue of staff welfare, I don't think that should really be brought into this discussion at this point in time. I don't think that's appropriate, and I know it wasn't you, Chairman, it was somebody else, but I don't think that's relevant. And the second point I just want to make very quickly is, this is such a critically important issue for this council, as you've mentioned, Councillor Keele, and you mentioned about the issues relating to this working party. At a previous meeting, I did mention about the setup of that and the composition of that, and I would just like to say again, as a plea to you really, as Chairman of Policy and Resources, I think it is extremely important, given the importance of that issue, that you're not only a member of that working party, but that you chair it. And you may be very busy, but I think it is critically important that there is the connection between this committee and that working party moving forward. I'll put it out there. You don't need to respond, but I've made my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I think I did respond to that previously. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other comments? No? Okay, well, the proposal has been proposed and seconded, so we'll put it to the vote. The recommendation is on page 99. Members, those in favour, please show. think that's, is that? Okay. Those against? And abstentions?
Yes, thank you.
Chair, that's 9 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you. Moving on, the next item is an exempt item, so we need to vote on exempt. Members, can I propose exempt from the chair?
Second that.
Seconded by Councillor Burr. All those in favour of exemption, please show. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. So could we stop the live stream, please? Thank you.